Shashi Balaji, Shri Mishra ji, Nidhi ji, Dhwani ji, उपस्थित मेरे सभी भाई बहन. Impressed by what Shashi ji said and what Nidhi said today. And just adding up my own experience of life, because what one states is through the experience of what one has undergone and what a person perceives. So, on disability, I am of the opinion that there has been too much focus on disability and less focus on ability. So if we really want to change perception, and if the youth is about inclusion, diversity, and working together, the focus has to move beyond disability and the focus has to be on ability. And if we start focusing on ability, we will realize that people who may sound disabled or people may talk about disability are actually more able than many, because their abilities, their faculties are far sharper than many others who call themselves able. So I think from Nidhi being one experience, we've all heard her, we know how able and capable she is. And that is what one has to start recognizing. I feel little small when people talk about disability. Again, I go back to my own experience. In my college, way back, again, I'm an ancient masterpiece if I can call. In my college, I used to have one person called Kamalbir Singh, who was a bad senior to us. And the job we were supposed to do, in the sense I was part of NSS in college. So we used to read aloud, and that was the time when there were no computers. That was the time when we used to make cassettes, वो छोटा tape recorder रख के. तो हम पूरे के पूरे novels, because उसका English literature subject था, so we used to just read the novels and several other books to him and make tape recordings. And those recordings is what he would hear and write his papers. And this gentleman, Kamalbir, used to top the university. So that is my initial experience with so-called disability, quote unquote. And thus I learned the lesson of my life, that it is not the disability which matters, it is the ability which matters. And the ability is what we need to focus on when we are discussing these subjects. So Civil20, I think, should say, if we really work for inclusion, if we really work for diversity, certain vocabulary and certain themes also need to change. And the theme has to be not so much focused, because when you talk about disability, the word itself you're discriminating. But when you talk of somebody, he's so intelligent, he's a topper, you forget that he has a sight issue, but he still tops. So you're focusing on the same person and you're focusing on his capability and capacity. So I would say, listening to Nidhi, I actually wanted her to do a stunt today, that she should do 1 minute show for us. If she's a stand-up comedian, I would love to watch her and I would love to hear what she has to say. And that's the ability part of it. I mean, who cares whether there's a sight issue or there isn't, but she's capable of entertaining us, she's capable of discussing subjects, she's an able person, so I think the conversations need to change. And the moment we change the conversation, this itself will become inclusive. And going back to our culture and history, I mean, this especially the sight issue is something I've been associated for a fairly long time. I mean, I talked about my exposure as a student. I used to have another friend who later became a lawyer, Sandeep, and we used to win quizzes. He was part of the team, again, too bad junior to me. And we were a group of 3 people, most Shaitan people, but we used to win the quizzes, and he was part of the same quiz team. And the faculty, and I can disclose it today because it's 35 years ago, तो मेरे को बहुत ज़्यादा फिल्मों की जानकारी नहीं होती थी, कुछ नहीं पता था. I had given up watching movies post my class 6th. I had taken a vow कि फिल्में नहीं देखूँ, तो मैं देखती नहीं थी, मुझे कुछ पता भी नहीं था. And there was always a section of movies and music and all. This guy was very, very good with classical music and Western music, and he knew everything about movies. So the call used to be, I will prepare for science and technology. This guy will prepare on music and art. And there was another guy, Ajay Bagra. He will prepare on pol science and history. And history was common to all. The general studies were common to all three of us will prepare, and we used to crack the quiz. So that was the division of labor. Why I'm saying all this? That the moment you work like a team, the differences just go away. And you become a team. Nidhi, being part of a steering committee, is part of Y20, is going to discuss the policies Government of India and the world needs to follow. So let's focus on ability, stop using the discriminatory words. That is how we change the mindset. And going back to the Indian ethos and value system, I must say there's a story about Ashtavakra. Those of you who have not read about it, please go back and read about it. This person was with 8 vicars of the body. 8 different parts of his body, 8 bends in his body he suffered from, but he was the one who wrote a treatise on Gita, Gyan. And we consider him a rishi because at that point in time he could give back to the society who was condemned by his own family at one time. He could give back the Gyan which was needed, the Gyan to be one with the God, came from a person who had possibly physical disability in terms of appearance, but mental ability to carry a person to the God, because God doesn't discriminate between people and the Atma is common, and that's why I started with the shloka of Nainam Chindanti Shastrani. That soul within us is same in all of us, and that soul needs to be respected for the abilities that soul can provide to rest of the society. And that's the message of Indian value system, ethos. We do not come from a civilization where if you had physical disability, you'll get thrown off a cliff and die. That's not our civilization. Our civilization, which is 5000 BC or beyond, respected whoever with whatever condition and tried to support. Today, when we look around, we do have issues with economic prosperity. And that is where I think we need to work on. The little difficulties that across we have in the society is ultimately boiling down not to the attitudes or the social issues, but when you have paucity of resources, when you have less money, when your economic strength is less or you're weak, that will impede the weakest link in the society. And that weakest link could be people who have some sort of physical disability and they get impeded because of economic conditions prevalent in the society. So I think the moment we all work towards getting 9% GDP, I hope and pray that things will sort out. I'm very happy we have some leaders from the industry. We need to support them so that India is able to engage and take its economic growth to 9% per year, and for continuously 10 years, things will change automatically. Because Indian society by and large, and people by and large, are compassionate, kind people. But sometimes, some people act in a mean way because of the greed, because of the money and balancing of resources. And those resources can easily be balanced with the mental ability, and when you think in a spiritual term, you always say, what is my lifetime worth? And post-COVID, what is it? Whether we are there next minute or not. And if I'm not going to be there, what are these material things worthy of? How many saris can you wear? How much jewelry can you use? And ultimately, the medical condition and the health and the nutritionists and all those people working in the field of science have realized the more, the little you eat, better it is for you. So you don't really need to eat a lot. How much will you consume? The more you consume, the worse it is for you. So if you really want to live long, you have to consume less. And you have to work more. You have to be in the sun. You have to walk around. You have to be with the nature. You have to eat less. These are the principles on which our society was based on. So I think I was very happy that science and technology and those subjects are getting discussed. So I feel Indians by and large were a scientific society. We had a culture of science, and nobody got killed for saying Earth goes around the sun. We didn't kill anyone for saying that. But before Galileo was killed 1,000+ years ago, Indians had already decided that Earth goes around the sun. And there are 9 planets. So before Kepler could write, we had already discovered, and our Janam, almanac, to calendar, to everything was already talking about. But what is a history? Is good to take lessons from. But we also have to take lesson that what happened to us? What happened to us that with so much of science, with so much of technology, with so much of knowledge, we became slaves? Imperialist powers could control us. They could destroy our culture. And today we are going to be getting lessons on diversity from them. Come on. People who believe in monotheistic religions, who do not accept others' point of view. People who do not respect the cultures. I mean, the so-called Vanvasi. I mean, I hate the word tribal, but that's the English word. But for Hindi language, the word is Vanvasi, forest dwellers. Forest, you could dwell wherever. I could be a forest dweller tomorrow. But if you call me tribal, it's like, not mainstream. What is mainstream and what is tribal? India did not know the difference. We respected all that. In fact, I'm inviting a whole lot of you. I don't know whether there will be seats enough or not, but we'll sit on the floor. There's a play happening today at NSD, which is about Bhim. The research on the character of Bhim. Now everybody knows he was most powerful guy, he was very strong, etc. But many instances of his life are not unraveled to us, and that is inclusion. He married Hidamba. What was that? If not mainstream prince marrying a tribal in today's time and age? Bhagwan Krishna marrying Rukmini from Arunachal. What was that? If not mainstream king marrying somebody from tribal community in today's language. So India did not believe in segregating. That's my point. My point is these marriages, mainstreaming was a constant affair with us. So we were always an inclusive society. Unfortunately, we do not sell this because we don't focus upon it. We do not understand it ourselves. We've not studied adequately, and I don't claim I have studied a lot, but I feel my life will have some lessons, some learnings, and thus I'm sharing my learning. I'm sure a whole lot of you will have different learning and different experiences, but this is what is my own experience, my own learning, and thus I'm sharing. In my assessment, Indian society was always an inclusive society. If you read Mahabharata, you know that even in terms of gender, Arjun himself, when he went to Northeast and lived with Chitraganda and others, he lived as a transgender. And we recognize that even transgenders in India, why was this such a big issue that Supreme Court comes down and all? So I call it a propaganda mechanism. Why I'll share that. In India, when this law existed for more than 200 years, because British introduced this law, there were 2 cases in 200 years. That means society did not discriminate. Otherwise, anyone dressed differently, looking differently should have been behind the bars. But it did not happen in India. We were accepting them as, and they are the ones who come and, on every auspicious occasion, they are dancing, whatever they have chosen. We've always had issues with economy. That's my emphasis. We've had issues with money. That's been our problem. But not social discrimination as the way it happened in West, that these people will get burned, they will be put behind bars. Nothing of that kind ever happened in India. And we are the ones who are getting lessons. That's what surprises me. So I think Civil20 should share its stories, should read Mahabharata to them, that Indian method of dealing with issues which can be divisive in society, which can divide the society to yes or no. You know how we deal with these subjects? By not discussing about them. You just accept. Stay quiet. Because someone will say, I don't like it. Someone will say, I like it. So you divide. But if you don't say a thing and people live, it's fine. I mean, everybody's living together. Everyone's part of the same existence. And in our behavior, in our conduct, we should work again on ability and not disability. Gender is not a disability to do a job of a security guard. Gender is not a disability to become a cook. Gender is not a disability to work in a factory. Gender doesn't come in the way of being a teacher or a principal. So I think acceptance is the modus without this. I mean, until unless one wants to be in a sexual relationship with someone else, then the gender comes in. Other than that, if my teacher who's to teach me what gender he, she has doesn't bother me, I'm there to learn. If somebody is a lawyer, the gender doesn't matter. Or you only need someone to represent your case well. If somebody is a cop, all you need is the person should be there to protect you. You don't need, unless and until you want to have a relationship. For them, the gender is material. For the rest of the society, it doesn't matter. It's a privacy issue. What one does in the bedroom is the privacy issue. So Indian society has a very different take on these subjects. We have a very different understanding and acceptance of our nature, which I think we are not able to sell. I'm sorry to use this word for the want of a better word, but the fact is we are not able to communicate right. We need to learn to communicate better and market ourselves. That look, this is my history. Look, this is who I am. But you have a history of burning them. You have a history of prisoning them. Thus, it becomes important for you. For me, they've always been there, around, and we don't discuss. And what is not permitted to heterosexuals in public places is not permitted to homos also. It's not permitted to anyone. You have private space, you have public space. And you live accordingly. And public space, you don't discuss your private lives. It's your business. And public spaces, the sanctity is very different, and that's how you need to live. I think we are missing on the conversation. I wish the youngsters will jump in to have this conversation open-heartedly, with evidence, with books, with learning, with reading. And then I want to quote one line which is from Vedas. It says, it's the young the strong, healthy, and intellectually sharp who will reach the Lord. So I want all the young ones to reach the Lord, to know what Lord is, what Lord's governance is all about. So I want all of you to be healthy. I want all of you to have a very, very sharp intellect, because that's what the country needs. In Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, that's what is going to take the country forward. And Prime Minister has repeatedly said, you know, the word Divyang was coined by him, by our Honorable Prime Minister. And the inspiration, again, obviously comes from our own culture, that you have stories like Ashtavakra and so on and so forth, where your physical body does not matter, it's the soul, it's the Atma. I am not just my physical being. खाली शरीर है हम लोग, कितना सुंदर दिखता है, नहीं दिखता है, कितना खाते, कितना पीते, कितना उस पे मेकअप लगाते, क्या यही जिंदगी है? Is that life? Answer is no. We are beyond this. And Divyang, Divya, godly. And that's godliness in all human beings need to be recognized. And that godliness, once recognized, whole lot of creepy things will disappear. And we all need to work together to get all those things out of our system and be confident in our approach when we deal with the world, know our own history, know our own culture, know our own value system. We are not really less than anyone. We may have made historical mistakes in our existence, which we all have to learn from, but we are not less than anyone. We have a great, great, great history. And when we say Vasudev Kutumbakam, because that's what Shashiji also said, I thought I'll complete the sentence, and that is Aham Nijam Paroveti Garna Lagu Chetsam Udar Charita Namtu Vasudev Kutumbakam. So this is mine, that is yours. Only small-hearted people talk about that. We are one big family, everything belongs to everyone, and thus we need to have the value of sharing, caring, and those values are the ones which we can show to the world. I mean, in so-called developed world, these values you'll not find. It's all about usurpation. It's all about me, mine, and that's it. Individualistic. We can be individualistic, but we are very, very community-oriented people. I'm not using the word communal, the right word is communal, because it can be misinterpreted the way people look at the word. But community, it's all about community. It's about sense of well-being, and that sense of well-being is what is about sharing and caring. So I was writing something. All of you would be wondering, what was I writing? When I come to this place, BVB, Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, I go back to my childhood. I don't know why, what takes me back, but I suddenly go back to my childhood. And thus I was remembering the poem of Rabindra Nath Tagore. And that poem which I would have read in school, so I told my assistant, I said, "Isko zara Google karke nikalo." I need to reread and I need to revisit, because 9th was Gurudev's Jayanti, and India got his place, Shanti Niketan, which was his residence, and also Vishwa Bharati, the university, is probably going to be, we've got it, this has been selected for inscription. Prime Minister was personally involved in this whole process, supervising things. On his birthday, we got this news that Indian nomination has been selected, and in the general body meeting at Riyadh, we'll get the certification and everything else. So that was a big opportunity for India, because at a time when India was subdued, lack of confidence, we are far better today. But imagine that time when there was Bengal famine, people are dying, we are exploited, people who are making us, muslin, their fingers are getting cut. More than 10 million people got killed by the imperialist forces. Before that, you had the empires, sultanates, and so on and so forth. Looting, killing, mauling, women being taken away, rapes, so on and so. I mean, it must have been a very, very bad time for us as a country. And at that time, to give that confidence to the countrymen, that yes, you can do it, you can make it, and these are the things you need to work on. So those words remain relevant till date. And those are very, very inspirational words. I read it in school, but I go back to this very poem because I think that's where the youth's focus should be. Because if country has to be where country needs to be in next 25 years, where you are going to be the leaders, you should make this poem as your vision, and not just vision, your motto of life. So I'll read it to you all. This is from Gitanjali, very famous poem, but I kind of go back to this poem. And recently I'm going back to this poem. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. These are my prayers. And I genuinely feel that I feel that all the decent and good thoughts which our ancestors have given us in the form of yoga, philosophy, Ayurveda, science, technology, mathematics, has to now be, we have to take the next step. There's enough which has been written. Let's put all that into action, and that's my expectation from the youth today. Thank you very, very much. Jai Hind.